The views and opinions expressed by the guests and hosts of this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Lansdowne Public Library or its affiliates.
Welcome to the Lansdowne Public Library's Geek Out podcast,
where we geek out about just about anything.
Before we get started, I'd like to let you know that if you want to join our podcast and geek out with us, where can we go?
Well, you can head right over to lansdownelibrary.org/podcasts, where you'll find a green register here button. Click that. There's a small little form to fill out just to let us know what it is you want to talk about, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
And, well, it's award season once again, which means that all the big shows to nominate and grant boons to all the wonderful work that entertainment has put out over the past year, they're coming. And one of the most illustrious is coming up on March 10th, that's Sunday, which is, of course, the Academy Awards. And to talk about this year, 2024's Academy Awards, we have our returning guest, Matt.
Hey, everybody. Matt Ortiz. Welcome back on the podcast. Love to be here. Love to talk about this stuff.
Now, I will stay just at the front because this will probably go up before the Oscars actually happen. But if it doesn't, it was certainly recorded before the Oscars have actually happened. So we don't know what won yet. We don't know if anybody's going to get slapped or anything exciting like that. So
all we know are the categories and what is in those categories, and the rest, well, I guess we'll hear from Matt. To you, since these are about movies, what are movies to you?
I guess kind of like as a very lofty kind of like academic answer, we've as a society and as a civilization have always had a very strong history of storytelling. And whether we see it today or not, film and filmmaking is almost an extension of that. Whether it's you are watching something that's deemed important like Oppenheimer or The Killers of the Flower Moon, or you're watching an action movie like Transformers from Michael Bay, everything is still some form of oral tradition and storytelling that's passed down through the generations. So I've always kind of seen it as not a holier than thou kind of medium, but something that's carrying on a stronger tradition than I think some people like to give it credit for.
Could put something so eloquent, but yeah. I would agree. I think it's really special the way that, if that's how you feel about them, I think that's a really deep connection.
And I think especially this year with the types of films that are nominated and the type of kind of subject matter each of them go over, whether it's biopics or it's fictions or adaptations of other books and things like that, this year kind of cements that kind of idea for me, especially just with the different stories that are being told and how they relate to that idea of like cultural storytelling and like oral tradition.
All right, well, there's the benchmark. You definitely know what you're talking about, so it's going to be very interesting to hear what your feelings on this year's films have been. I guess it's been kind of a crazy year with all those
writer's strike, actors' strikes. The Animation Guild is starting to talk about their upcoming strike. We're going to see the after effects of this a lot more next year than this year, at least as far as the Oscars are concerned. We've had a lot of films that are going to be pushed back and what have you.
And I think evidenced at least kind of, especially today, when you look at the writer's strike and things like that, the necessary actions that need to be taken when you're talking in regards to films that were pushed back. Dune was supposed to come out in October and November of last year. I think a lot of these films, especially in the technical categories, would sadly have been left out if Dune had been released in November, at least especially from what I'm hearing from early screenings, and it does come out today. I think that we'd be looking at a very different Oscars pool without the strikes that happened last year.
Yeah, I mean, because there's Dune, there was, the Academy is never the biggest fan of science fiction films, to be fair, but, you have Dune, we had the new Deadpool movie would have been out before this season, which probably would have gotten some sort of technical award and not much else, as is kind of tradition there.
And then even smaller pictures like Mike Nichols' The Bike Riders. Yeah. It now comes out in June. That would have come out first week of December. And again, from like different kind of festivals, the word about this film is that it's very good and kind of grounded in the performances of both Tom Hardy and Austin Butler, who again is also in Dune and we may be needing to look out for in the next few years.
Yeah, we might be seeing a fair bit of them.
Let's see. Let's start with, we've got the Oscars ballots right in front of us. And by that I mean a chart with the different categories and the nominees. There's a lot of films here. Do you know how many you've seen?
Yeah, I think we should definitely start with Best Picture, which goes against all Oscar rules and history, and they would probably poo-poo us for it, but it is the biggest category, and this year it kind of seems like instead of it being more of a variety in nominations, while there is a lot of the nominations that we're going to be talking about here do stem from that Best Picture, which is not uncommon, but seems to be
I feel like
a bigger emphasis this year.
It's a lot more this year. Like,
I have seen, admittedly, all but 2 of these.
which 2 have you missed?
I have missed Poor Things because it was very hard to find a spare 2.5 hours and a theater that was playing it nearby.
Yeah.
Although if anybody is interested in watching it, it is still in theaters, and it is going to be hitting Hulu services March 7th, so just in time before the Oscars.
Yeah, that's kind of nice. At least you'll be able to see it before they hit.
And I have also not seen Zone of Interest. Less of a runtime difficulty on that one, more of a availability.
Someplace that's showing it.
But I have seen all of the other films on this list. How many of you guys seen? What are we...
This is actually one of the fewest I've seen for these. I have only seen 3 of the Best Picture nominees this year, and part of that has just been, honestly, well, part of it has been so many of them have been released very recently compared to Let's Know 'Em. Like, I feel like a lot of these were rushed out to get them in for Oscar seasons. But I have seen American Fiction, I've seen Barbie, and I've seen Oppenheimer.
I admittedly have not seen any of these yet. Barbie's been on my list. Oppenheimer's been teetering on my list, but
They do make a very unique double feature, to be
Yes,
fair.
they would.
It's worth doing.
yeah, I've got this. Admittedly, Best Picture's never my category. My category is definitely animated or something more niche, but
Yeah. The movies I like in the year do tend to end up more in either the technical categories or sometimes the scores. Although this year has been a little weird for that one, I feel.
I'm just going to, just real quick, for the ones you haven't seen, or really anything in Best Picture, I'm curious, because you said they were hard to find. Are any of these foreign or more indie films?
So, Past Lives had a bigger release, but it was half of the movies in Korean, and I think a lot of markets felt like that wouldn't sell very well, and possibly. I'm not sure. I can't speak to that definitively, but it was very hard to find showtimes. It was playing in a lot of theaters in Philadelphia, not a lot outside in the suburban areas or more towards Jersey. It was playing in those bigger multiplexes like Cherry Hill that have spare theaters to play it. But it's not a movie. It's a fantastic film, but I don't know if it was a movie that was going to bring in big audiences, so I don't know if A24 really gave it a proper big release. Another one, Anatomy of a Fall. That is the only foreign film in the category, I believe. Fantastic film, 2.5 hour procedural kind of court drama about a possible murder of a husband in his home. Very great film, but that again was not given as much of a kind of a push from Neon. Neon's more of a independent cinema house, so they're putting out independent films, things like that, so that's not getting a super wide release. You're going to find that at your Bryn Mawr Film Institutes, Landmark Theaters, the Philadelphia Film Society. That's where I saw it. I caught it at the film festival. They had it as the pre-festival screening, so that's where I ended up seeing it. But had I not, I'm not sure I would have gotten a chance to get out and see that.
Unfortunately, American audiences do still have that sort of disdain for subtitles.
And if anybody's interested, I will say, I'd say about half of Anatomy of a Fall and half of Past Lives, the 2 foreign language films technically on this list, are half in English. The first half of Past Lives is mostly in Korean, and the second half of Anatomy of a Fall is mostly in French. And then Zone of Interest, I believe, is in German.
Yeah.
That's fully in German. So that was another one that they rolled that, A24 rolled that out very slowly. Certain cities got it, then a couple more cities got it, then a couple more cities got it, and I don't think it was in wide release until January. So that would have been a little more difficult for people to follow. If they're not looking specifically for that film, the release schedule is a little confusing, and being able to run out and see it when it's available might not have been at everyone's top priority. It's also a very dark film from what I hear. I've not seen it. I know it's based on a novel. Just a quick synopsis for everybody. It's about a family of an SS officer that lives right outside the walls of a concentration camp. It's a very less action-heavy, more details, background kind of atmosphere film. You're watching basically the daily life of this family, but in the background and kind of not even highlighted is the tragedies and the small things you can hear over their family wall. So that may not have been at the top of everybody's list to go experience in general.
Not the feel-good movie of the year, certainly.
No. We're not looking at a ton of feel-good ones this year at the Oscars.
No, it's very dour. Other than, Barbie is kind of the big outlier of that one. That is literally the brightest, most colorful film I've seen this year.
Even those that you could consider comedies, like Barbie, American Fiction, I believe is technically it's a satire, but it's technically a comedy. And The Holdovers, which also is a comedy, has some comedy in it, but all the films this year are dealing with very heavy topics, and I think that may, not in a bad way, but after heavy years with COVID and quarantine and everything like that, don't know if that was at the top of everybody's list to run out and see.
It's one of the big kind of dichotomies of film, because there's certainly a lot of film that is escapism for me. Like, I love going to see the big, goofy Marvel movies because they're fun, whereas these more art house movies do tend to be a bit more, they're fascinating, they're interesting, but you don't often leave feeling better than you did when you walked in the door. But you still felt something. Like, they are still these huge impacts.
Well, that was a big thing after COVID. One of the first films, because I remember theaters were struggling to get people back in. And I remember one of the biggest films to get people back in was, if I remember correctly, Godzilla vs. Kong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was
March of that year.
That was the big release. And they also, smartly put that direct to HBO Max. HBO Max, yeah. Which ruffled. I learned I had an HBO Max account.
Well, all right. Then let's just, I guess we'll go through down the list of the ballot, and we'll hear what you got to say about the films nominated, what you think will win, or what you want to win. We'll
all right.
see.
If we're looking at Best Picture, I guess for me personally, and again, film is subjective. Not everyone's going to like the same things. Not everyone's going to think the same things, but that's what makes it amazing and perfect. What I would really like to see win is The Holdovers, Paul Giamatti. What a wonderful film. It's just so warm. It's got that 70s aesthetic. It's shot in that aspect ratio. It's probably digitally added, but you can still appreciate the digitally added film grain. And what a performance by Paul Giamatti. I mean, when I was growing up, Paul Giamatti was Big Fat Liar with Frankie Muniz, and he was, but he was on the side putting out films like, played a comic book writer in one film. It's American something. No, it was American something. It's the same director, Alexander, but I can't remember the name, but then he's in films like Sideways and things like that. And he was doing these small, amazing performances that are not getting seen by the masses. And I think, unfortunately, it's going to get lost in the shuffle of the awards this year. But if you do see any of these movies, I would definitely see The Holdovers. The wonderful performances by, again, Paul Giamatti, Divine Joy Randolph, who we'll get back to soon. I think she's taking home an award on March 10th. And then first-time performance by Dominic Sessa, who plays the young lead of the film. Just so incredibly vulnerable, and they're not putting on a show. They're not trying to win Oscars, because some films that are put out, some films which we will talk on this list, seem to have been put out solely for the idea of this is going to win an Oscar.
New Killers of the Flower Moon.
We're also looking at Maestro, possibly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
but
that one is kind of fun in that regard, though.
In a perfect world, I would want The Holdovers to win, or Past Lives. I think in the same way with The Holdovers, when you're looking at films, and if you're just looking at oral tradition and kind of that idea that I brought up earlier, Past Lives is such a heartbreakingly beautiful film about the idea of love and how it's perceived in a different culture. I don't want to give too much away, because if you know too much about it, it kind of loses a little bit of that emotional impact when you're watching it for the first time, because you're kind of expecting things. But it's just such an interesting portrait of not only a life up to a certain point, but just how love is perceived through different cultures, through different people, through different lenses that you're not necessarily looking at day to day or thinking about. And it's just so emotionally mature in a way that you're really not expecting. Every time I was watching that movie and I thought, oh, it's going to take this emotional romantic movie kind of trope turn, it just completely subverts anything you were expecting. And it's so beautiful, and it's a little heavy, but it's supposed to be like that. You're going to cry, be ready, bring tissues. But in a perfect world, I think Holdovers or Past Lives would win. Now, of course, it's not undeserving, but what I think is probably going to take the award on that night is Oppenheimer.
My money would be on either Oppenheimer or Killer of the Flower Moon.
What an astonishing film, Oppenheimer.
Yes.
I know some people have their gripes with it, and there are certain things, but from a technical aspect, it's amazing he could even put that together. From an editing aspect, for a 3-hour movie, it moves like a bullet train. And from an acting standpoint, Cillian Murphy, obviously, head of the pack, star of the film, but he's surrounded by such talent in the rest of the cast. And from actors, you're not even almost expecting to see things. You've got one of them I was not expecting such a performance from, Josh Hartnett. He plays one of his fellow physicists. I know Josh Hartnett from early 2000s, really bad horror thrillers.
Yeah.
And I did not know he had a performance like that in him. He gives such almost a nuanced performance in contrast to, or like juxtaposition to Oppenheimer and his journey and then things like that. And I was lucky enough to see it in 70 millimeter IMAX at the King of Prussia Theater. I've never seen a film like that. That the way they use the aspect ratio and the enormity and just the idea of scale to when he was filming it to the acting almost is in contrast and in juxtaposition to the scale, and it's always there and it's always present. It's just such a fantastic experience, even though I know it's not up everybody's alley and not everybody, including me, necessarily wants to see it win Best Picture. It definitely would be deserving if it took it home.
If nothing else, I do think Nolan should get Best Director. Like, it is just an amazing piece of sound.
The only thing about Missing Poor Things this season, unfortunately for me, is I've read the book, and the book is fantastic. I implore everyone to read it. If you've seen the film, I would read the book. If you haven't seen the film, I would read the book first, then see the film. The book, for a basic synopsis, it's kind of almost like a female Frankenstein story. This woman is brought back from the dead, and she's learning about life and what it means to live a life and what it means to kind of make your own way in the world. And the book is wonderfully weird and delightful, but also kind of heavy and looking at those kind of more questionable aspects that we don't really like to think about in life, those gray areas. And it's really good. It's surprisingly funny. Yorgos Lanthimos, the director, he's really good at balancing those tones between the macabre and the comedy. So that's one I'm very disappointed in myself that I've not been able to see yet, considering I've read the subject material. But that's another one. If I had seen, I feel I would have more to say on it and a better idea of if it would be able to take home Best Picture. Jeff, you were talking about Best Director. We can move on to that category. That's the next one on our list. Again, we're looking at all the directors from Best Picture. I believe
makes sense. It'd be very, very rude to. I mean, in fairness, there are less nominees for Best Director than Best Picture, so some people here will get snubbed. Get a Gerwig, a few others. Obviously, just when you're going from 10 to 5, well,
and it's not uncommon. It's not always a rule to go by, but it is sometimes present in the Oscars that Best Director will get nominated, but will not get nominated for Best Picture. That's always been, or vice versa, gets nominated for Best Picture, not Best Director. So it's a very contentious kind of analyzed category in that regard.
So then Barbie sweep.
Interestingly enough, in the case of Barbie, there are a lot of almost snubs when it comes to Barbie, because, again, Greta Gerwig did not get nominated for Director. In fairness, looking at the list, it's a stacked list.
It's a very stacked year.
And same with Margot Robbie for Best Actress, not there. America Ferrera did get Best Supporting Actress nod for her role, and it's sitting right in front of me. I don't need to remember. I can just look at Ryan Gosling's name and remember Ryan Gosling's name got nominated for Supporting Actor.
I think both to its benefit and its detriment, Barbie was memeified.
Yes.
And while I thought the film was great, and I was not expecting one of the best, when I was going into the Barbie movie, I was not expecting to see one of the best examples of satire in film I'd seen in quite a while.
I was floored.
I was delightfully surprised. I really liked the film. Unfortunately, when you stack it up against these films, I think it's going to be very hard for Barbie to stand on its own. And as you can see with the nominations, it unfortunately fell short in a few categories, which I think a lot of film Twitter or social media has taken that to seem that people didn't like the film or that it's not the achievement that it is. And I think that's just something that's unfortunate in internet culture today, especially surrounding film, is if it's not nominated for these awards, it's not a good film or it's not a great film. Whereas I think Barbie, while not having a ton of nominations, I think was a fantastic film.
It is one of my favorites. I will say, the one that I will actually stand up and say, no, that is a snub. You cannot tell me that Barbie did not deserve to make it to the list for makeup and hairstyling.
I think that's a crime. I think we'll get to the snubs later. I have a list. Best believe I have a list. But there were a few categories where I think there were a few categories where Barbie snuck in where maybe it shouldn't have. And again, not because it was undeserving. And I think there's a few categories where they may have left Barbie out because they thought, well, for giving it to the bigger categories, maybe we can kind of skirt around that. Back to Best Director. Looking at this list, again, I've not seen Poor Things, but Yorgos Lanthimos is almost he's one of those directors that whenever he makes a film, unfortunately, whether you've seen it or not, it's always been nominated for Oscars. It's always taken home awards at different award shows, which is, I think, very impressive when it comes to his films specifically, because they are definitely not everybody's cup of tea.
No. I was actually very surprised to see Poor Things, it's not the sort of movie the Academy generally likes.
I think that story is so universal that no matter how weird he made it, it was gonna come across. It was gonna resonate with audiences. Scorsese did an amazing job with Killers of the Flower Moon. I thought the movie was good. It's almost page to screen, the book, which works in its benefit for a lot of it, works to its detriment for a little bit. I think it's a wonderful achievement. I think Scorsese as always delivers a fine film. Definitely a little contentious in the way you're looking at representation for the Osage people and kind of the route that the story decided to take and focus on. I've been hearing things on the Twitterverse and in the sphere that may have been Apple's decision, but we're not going to make any definitive statements here. I don't see Scorsese taking it, but obviously if Scorsese's putting out a movie, you're almost always going to see him in that category because he just puts such attention to detail into his films that it's almost hard not to recognize that and at least have it nominated. Christopher Nolan Oppenheimer, I think he's the clear frontrunner.
Yeah, I think he's the man to beat.
I won't go into it again just because I kind of sang its praises in the best picture, but Oppenheimer was almost a lifetime achievement of a film. When you take such dense source material and are able to kind of streamline it and give it to an audience in the way that he did and at the scale that he did, it's pretty incredible. Justine Triet, I may have butchered her name. I apologize, Anatomy of a Fall. Loved the film. It's 2.5 hours and you kind of feel it towards the end, but it's obviously like it's a bigger story when you're watching it. So it needs that time to breathe and kind of play out. Fantastic film, fantastic acting, fantastic direction. And then Jonathan Glazer, I've not seen Zone of Interest, but from what I'm hearing, being able to adapt something so dark and almost undesirable in a storytelling way, I can see, at least conceptually, that him being in this list is definitely deserved. I think I would give it to Christopher Nolan on both. I want Christopher Nolan to win, and I think he will win.
Same, honestly.
All right, so then
next, Best Actress.
Best Actress. I'll start it right here. I'm a Lily Gladstone stan. She's taking this award. If she doesn't take this award, I think there will be a riot in LA. I think it would be the upset of the year. I think if you're looking at any of these, if we're considering any in our heads a quote-unquote lock, I think it's Lily Gladstone for Best Actress. She's fantastic in the film. The nuanced performance she gives as this character who is independent and strong but also like trodden upon and almost kind of sidelined towards the end of the film while she's on screen, and just with what she's given, she does such a fantastic job. You can't take your eyes off her. Her acting is so raw and emotional and real. And she's up against greats like Leo and De Niro and some smaller character actors that are in the film that, you've seen in a lot of Scorsese things, but you may not know their name. Just all around a fantastic job. And it's going to be very hard to beat her this year. She gave such a wonderful performance. I don't know if you guys know this, but she was in interviews lately. She was looking at coding classes at the community college right before, or in the weeks leading up to Scorsese calling her. She was going to give up acting because of no representation in her field and not being able to secure roles or kind of show off her talent. And now A24 has got a film that they're releasing of hers. I think it's called Fancy Pants. That's supposed to be phenomenal as well. And The Unknown Country, another film that unfortunately has gone severely underseen this year. Another fantastic Lily Gladstone performance. She has been doing incredible work this year, and I think she is very deserving of this award.
All right.
Does however have our first nominee that is not also in Best Picture for, I'm assuming that's pronounced Naiad.
Naiad, yes. I admittedly have not seen this film either. Partly from interest, but I've heard very good things about it. Annette Bening, again, I can't really say much because I haven't seen the film. I talked to other people who have seen it. They say she gives a good performance. We will get to it later. Maybe not the one to have seen in that film. There may be other better performances that are nominated that we'll get to later. Carey Mulligan in Maestro, I thought, we'll get into our thoughts of Maestro at the end. I thought that movie was entirely made for an Oscar, unfortunately. Yes. I think it was technically wonderful, kind of in the same way you're looking at Oppenheimer for like scale and just being able, the kind of shots that Bradley Cooper is able to pull off as a sophomore director, and just the kind of editing and pace is pretty astounding for his body of work. It's a great film technically. I don't know if it's a great film story-wise, and I don't know if it really... It's it's about 2 hours, I think, or 2 hours and some change. I would say about the first half of the film is a very in-depth and kind of interesting look at Leonard Bernstein and his relationship with his wife, played by Carey Mulligan. and their dynamic and how it relates to his music and things like that. And then I would say the second half of the film takes a very nice ice glide over any of the issues it brings up. And it doesn't want to linger on them, and it doesn't want to kind of explore them deeper or look at the darker side of it. So it's a little heavy-handed in its portrayal. But I think Carey Mulligan did a fine job, as always. I mean, anything she's in she's always wonderful in it. I'm starting to prefer her odder characters. We'll get into it with snubs later, but like when films like Saltburn or In Promising Young Women, kind of playing these more off-kilter characters that aren't as prestigious or seen as Oscar-worthy, things like that. I think she shines a little more in those areas, but again, a fine performance. Sandra Hüller, I believe is how you pronounce her name, for Anatomy of a Fall. Fantastic performance in that film. A very hard role to take on in a film where you're looking at a character where, as an audience, you can't tell if she's guilty or not. It can be very easy as an actor to play that ham-handedly and be like, oh, am I guilty? Oh, am I not? But she gives just such a rich performance, and she lives in that character, and it's a person, and it's a life that you're examining, and it's a murder that you may be examining. She does a wonderful job. She also is in Zone of Interest. She plays the lead. She's had a very big year. Also, as far as I've heard, equally as nomination worthy. I don't think this is the last time we'll be seeing her on any of these lists by a long shot. And Emma Stone, as always, with Yorgos, when he directs a movie, he's gonna get nominated for Best Director. Emma, when she's in a Yorgos movie, she's getting nominated for Best Actress. Again, I can't speak to it because I haven't seen it, but from what I've seen from promotion and from clips and things like that, she just looks to be having so much fun in the best way possible. Because again, that's someone as an actress started in early 2000s comedies like Superbad and Easy A, which were good films in their own right, but did not telegraph to any of us this kind of meteoric rise that she would have in these recent years. Such a fantastic actress, so much fun to watch on screen, so many interesting choices she makes. I think in this list, she's the only big contender that could possibly take down Lily Gladstone in this category.
All right. There you have it. So, I guess on to Best Actor.
All right. Well, we can start with the one at the top, Paul Giamatti. God, I would love if he took that. Man, would I love that.
Very, very.
Oh, The Holdovers is so good. I saw it on like a Tuesday night because I had nothing to do, and it ended up being top 5 film of the year. It is fantastic. He gives a no-nonsense, like 50s, 60s, 70s lead actor performance, just right to the bone. He's not putting on airs. It's a character that's not a traditional leading man. He's kind of gross, and he's a little disheveled, and he's not very likable. But you fall in love with that character, and he gives such a fantastic performance, and I don't think Paul Giamatti is given his respect in Hollywood, unfortunately. And in a perfect world, I would want him to take it. Cillian Murphy, again, wonderful performance in Oppenheimer. Very tragic in a way, in the way it's portrayed. You want to like him, and you see his ambition, but he's not the greatest person. He's human. Everyone wanted to put him on a pedestal. He's this amazing scientist that created the atomic bomb, but he's human. And that sometimes, and you see how it seeps not only into his work, but into his personal life. And in a film where you would think it would glide over things like that, like the way Maestro did, Christopher Nolan and Cillian got into the nitty-gritty and the not-so-pretty parts of Oppenheimer's life and the way he was portrayed or seen in public and things like that. And I think he gives a wonderful performance. Jeffrey Wright in American Fiction, I'd put him up there with Giamatti. Just delightful. The film is funny, quick-moving. It's biting satire. It is unforgiving in the way it looks at how we as a society treat or almost fetishize African-American literature and arts and things like that. But Jeffrey Wright he's so quick. He's so witty in this film in a way that's almost lulling, like in a way you wouldn't recognize. But he's fantastic. He, again, is, I think, an actor who's just starting to get his flowers in the community. He was in Westworld. He's been in a lot of smaller things. He kind of does a lot of voice work. He's a fantastic actor. And while I don't think he's going to take it this year again, I think he's one we'll see kind of repeatedly on these lists in the near future. I've not seen Rustin, which is a Netflix biopic, if anybody is interested in watching it. Coleman Domingo, though, always gives a great performance. He's another, like Jeffrey Wright, kind of a character actor. Fear the Walking Dead, Euphoria, things like that. Used more sparingly than I would like, but anything he's in, he makes a big impact. And Bradley Cooper in Maestro, while I may not have loved the film, I thought he was good in the film. Again, I think with Maestro in particular, there are moments that I can pick out of that film and go, this is fantastic, this is why it's on the Oscars list. And there are some scenes where his performance would be those things I'm picking out. I don't know if I would have left him on this list if I had my druthers, but Bradley Cooper he's shown us in the past few years. Again, Maybe it's a trend now that I'm thinking about it. We're looking at early 2000s comedy actors,
2000s,
and they're really just starting to show that, we can be funny, but we've got talent.
It's apparently now, it's if you were in the 2000s early comedies, you are now either a Marvel film star or you are in these Oscar films.
Or in the case of Jeffrey Wright and Bradley Cooper, both. I'd want Paul Giamatti to take it. I think it's going to be Cillian Murphy. Deservingly so.
It's kind of my guess as well, as it'll be Cillian.
I think crazy upset, dark horse, coming out from behind Jeffrey Wright possibly, but I don't see a lot of hope for that.
It would be exciting. But yeah, I don't think we're going to see it. But, fingers crossed. It'd be fun, if nothing else. I love an upset.
Yes. All right, so if we're looking at the next category, Best Supporting Actress, I sung her praises earlier. I will till the day I die. If you stop me in public, I could talk for hours about her performance. Divine Joy Randolph in The Holdovers, I think, is a no-brainer. I think I very, very infrequently make comments that are definites, especially about award season things. I would give up a foot if she didn't win this award. I think in the way Paul Giamatti is so vulnerable and warm in that film in a very odd, off-kilter way, she is the second beating heart of this film. She plays a cook at the school that has just lost her son in Vietnam, and the way she gracefully kind of acts her way through that, and again, isn't very hammy or isn't playing up that kind of woe is me kind of pity kind of character that you could have taken that down, or it could have been just like a glum kind of character like that. She becomes almost the second beating heart of this film. And again, I'll say it throughout the Holdovers till the day I die. It's a new comfort film. It's just so warm in a way that film doesn't seem to be anymore these days. She gives such a wonderfully nuanced and very complicated as an actress performance, and I think she is deserving. I think she'll definitely take it. Emily Blunt in Oppenheimer I thought was fantastic. That's kind of Cillian's movie, so it's a little hard to look at other performances, and we'll talk about it soon in the Best Supporting Actor. There are some actors that broke through. She's definitely one of them as his wife. More in the later scenes of the film, she kind of gets her due, and you kind of see her more as a character and more as an actress, and she's very good. Jodie Foster in Nyad. I have not seen Nyad. I heard hers is the performance to watch, not Ninette Benning. I just got finished watching Jodie Foster in True Detective.
Yeah.
I always find her an actress that I'm not necessarily looking for in a film, but if she's there, I know it's going to be good. I know anything that she's going to be on screen for is going to be good. Danielle Brooks, honestly, unfortunately, I have not seen The Color Purple yet. That was another one. It's almost 2.5 hours. Trying to find the time for that. It also had a very limited theater run. It was released wide, but I believe it was only in theaters with a good amount of showtimes for maybe a week or two. Yeah. It got lost in that Christmas shuffle, unfortunately. I've heard very good things. I've not seen the film. I can't really speak to it. That's on HBO Max if anybody would like to see that as well. I believe the original and the new version. It's nominated here. And America Ferrera and Barbie, I thought she was good. I thought the film was good. I think a lot of it derives from that monologue she gives towards the end of the film. If you've seen the film, I think that's a very strong part of the performance.
Her standout scene, because for a lot of the film, she's just sort of in the background.
She's almost just kind of there conveniently until the end when it kind of ties her in, which is unfortunate from a screenwriting stance, just from America Ferrera being such a fantastic actress. And had she been given more screen time and more to do almost in the first 2 acts of that film, almost kind of giving off that same warmth and just that same energy that Divine was giving off in The Holdovers. And I don't want to spoil Barbie because what her character is and how she relates to it is kind of a big plot point towards the end. But I thought that was a very sweet and very kind of welcome reverse on the trope of Barbie, and I thought it was very good. I'll see America Ferrera in anything. Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, watching that as a kid, another actress that I've been watching since a kid. I'll watch her in anything. I'm glad to see her on the list. But yeah, I think this is Divine Joy Randolph's year, hands down.
All right, this is the Best Supporting Actor.
We can kind of go quickly through this, unfortunately, because I haven't seen Mark Ruffalo in Poor Things. I've heard kind of polarizing things. I've heard either it's fantastic and wonderful and weird, or it's too much and kind of takes up a lot of the air in the room. Ryan Gosling in Barbie I thought was great. I don't know if he deserves to be on this list.
Again, I do feel like it feels weird to have him there, but not
Margot Robbie
as actress. He was a blast in the movie, but...
And I think his character, while some may see it originally or as you're watching the film is kind of shallow and kind of down the road becomes very unlikable, I think he gives a nuanced performance that, you're not going to get it from a lot of actors these days where you love to hate him and you hate to love him, and it takes
a special kind of actor to be able to be at this point in the film, this character is a complete jerk, but I still enjoy watching him be that jerk.
And I think he's on this list particularly because, while I think I would have put other actors in his place on this list, at least personally, he 100% commits to that role. There's not a moment where I am watching that film and I go, this is Ryan Gosling doing a Ken impression. I'm watching Ken on that screen. He kind of disappears, and while he is the pretty boy and kind of things like that, he kind of loses that moniker and kind of that air about him as the film goes on. And I will say he does deserve to be on that list in that regard, that he 100% commits to the role. Sterling K. Brown, if Robert Downey Jr. had not been in Oppenheimer this year, I'd want him to win it again. American Fiction, a film that I'm championing, but I am afraid will get lost in the award shuffle. He's fantastic in that film. He plays the brother to Jeffrey Wright in American Fiction, and it's not very clear, his character arc, until the end, but when it hits, it is very emotional. It's very subtle. It's very quiet. While this character is kind of big and bombastic and a little kind of loud about everything in a way where he's living his life the way he wants to. He's not going to let anybody give him any nonsense. He's not going to be pushed around. He still gives a very quiet and emotional performance and has some of the funniest lines in the film. I think Sterling K. Brown definitely deserves to be on the list. I think in a different year, he's going to take it as well. But unfortunately, you've got the Titanic performance that Robert Downey Jr. gives in Oppenheimer. I'd heard about it before the film. I'd known about it going into it, but he almost steals that movie from Cillian. It's astounding the way, and again, this is a character that you love to hate at every turn, where you think maybe he'll redeem himself. Maybe he won't be this pile of flaming trash that they're portraying him to be. He just leans into it and you're like, oh, you cannot stand him. And it's so triumphantly kind of shown there at the end when Albert Einstein's walking away from the pond, and you get it both from his perspective and from Oppenheimer's perspective, and almost how Robert Downey Jr.'s character's ego lets him perceive that in a different light. It's so fascinating, and I think he's going to take it. I think post-Marvel, he's been making some very good choices, and I think this shows the film community as a whole that he's not, while fantastic in it, he is not only Iron Man, he is still a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, as long as he doesn't try and do another Dr. Doolittle.
No, hopefully. Oh, I saw that movie recently. Not a huge fan. Not up there with one of my favorites.
Probably his worst role.
And I guess we're overlooking De Niro.
Yeah.
I thought he was fine in the role. I thought he was good at portraying that character. You hate him. He is a scum. There's no other way to say it. That character is absolutely the worst. De Niro plays it menacingly. Another one where I'm not going to take away from his performance. Don't know if it deserves to be on the list. But again, De Niro, when you're getting him in a movie other than War on Grandpa, I think you really know what you're getting.
There are definitely two shades of De Niro in that regard.
De Niro has still got to pay bills at the end of the day.
Exactly. Sometimes you take a role for the money. This certainly does feel like this will almost certainly be Robert Downey Jr.'s time to shine.
Yeah.
Now we get to move on to some of the technical awards, which are a little less interesting to talk about, sure, but, well, I mean, the first one is visual effects are kind of huge, especially nowadays.
At least to me, as someone who is an avid watcher of films and is just so immersed in the world, juxtaposing people being bored by it or being like, all right, let's get through these. These are the most interesting to me. These have always been, I'm always like, I feel like these are the real races because you can't really tell who's going to win.
Ones to talk about, like,
oh, I could talk for hours.
Some more than others, because I mean, especially like best original score. To me, the best original score is always going to be the movie where I didn't really even notice the music until I'm listening to it separately. Like,
I definitely want to circle back around to that, but yes, I would. I used to agree with that point of view.
Visual effects, of course. I mean, this one tends to be one of my favorite categories because it's the place where a lot of the movies I really like manage to sneak in despite not being the kind of films the Academy likes. This is where horror and sci-fi gets to live.
And I will agree with that. That's almost the magic of filmmaking, is that a lot of these films, like you said, you're not going to notice you're watching a visual effect, or you're not going to necessarily in the moment realize you're taking in breathtaking cinematography if they're doing it very well, and if they're doing it at the caliber to be nominated for the Oscars.
I would never be able to guess who's going to win best cinematography if it's a film I've only seen once, because you're really going to not notice those details on a first or maybe even second watch.
But we'll start with best visual effects. I may be the only one to champion the creator, at least on a...
For special effects, and again, it did phenomenal at what it wanted to do in that regard.
Well, I wouldn't put it in top 5. I think it sneaks in at the end of my top 10 of the year. I was, at least personally, I know it got its praises. It didn't make a lot of money. Gareth Edwards, I believe, was the director. He did Rogue One. I think he's a fantastic director. I think he always makes spectacle, but he makes spectacle grounded in a way that kind of Christopher Nolan does.
Yeah.
I thought it was an incredibly emotional film. It was so good. But those visual effects, again, like we were speaking to earlier, that you're not going to notice, they are almost seamless in the way he kind of blends in these AI or robotic characters, and he's using real actors. This isn't mocap performance. This is everyone's there on the soundstage, or he shot a lot of this on site, I think, in Thailand. And you can really see it. And it's so... The way he shot this, you don't know you're watching special effects. And I think it's very interesting in the way you're getting a story that's very reminiscent of Apocalypse Now and kind of those late era 1900s like war films. But you're getting these fantastic visuals that, you're not expecting from a film like that. So the way he weaves the technical aspect and the emotion in the film, I think is fantastic. Yeah, I'll be if I'm the only one on the top of the hill, I will die on it that I think The Creator's a sneakily fantastic film that, while not necessarily lauded at the moment, will be one that we go back to.
I think it's going to get a good cult following as it progresses. It's going to be one of those sort of sleeper hits.
I mean, skip over the second one on the list because I do really want to talk about that one.
I mean, that I believe is what we really when you get to best visual effects. Because I mean, I'll be honest, I have not seen the new Mission Impossible, but I thought it
was a really good spy movie. It's really hard to make a spy movie these days. Yeah. This isn't the Cold War anymore. It's kind of seen as your grandfather's favorite film genre. But I think Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible and Christopher McQuarrie, they kind of find a way to keep making each successive film better. And while I thought it was a fantastic film, I think they're really looking at it from that train sequence at the end, which again is a huge feat. What they end up pulling off, it is a 50-minute set piece that was cut down from an hour-and-a-half set piece. So all the moving parts that they kind of juggle, very impressive. Don't know if it belongs on this list. Napoleon, I admittedly have not seen.
Everything I've heard about that movie has been remarkably negative.
I've heard
it's beautiful, but it is the dumbest thing people have ever seen. Even reading things the director has said, I'm like, really? It's like, apparently there's a scene where Napoleon fires cannons at the pyramids for seemingly no reason.
I remember hearing about that scene.
Yeah. That is, I believe it's untrue. I believe, and again, I've not seen it, so I can't speak to it, but from people that I've heard from that liked it and disliked it, you're not getting a straight biopic here.
No.
You're getting much more of a nuanced satire at how much of a fool Napoleon really was.
It's almost, from what I've been hearing about it, it kind of reads more like a Big Fish story version of Napoleon.
It's a Napoleon slander piece, to be sure.
So in English.
Guardians of the Galaxy 3, wonderful movie.
Yeah.
Amazing visual effects. I'd be surprised if that doesn't take it home.
It's one of those things where, while the effects are impressive, and I find this to be true for a lot of the more recent Marvel films, so much of that is just shot on a green screen that it's kind of like, this is basically an animated film at this point.
Yeah.
And again, they do it better than, for example, Ant-Man and the Wasp managed with their visual effects.
And I think that's just because James Gunn is so heavily involved with that, and he takes such
much more. He shows a lot of care with his cast.
I think it was visually, it was very beautiful to look at. Again, what James Gunn can pull off with the amount of money that he gets is incredible.
But he's given a lot of money, which is quite the opposite of our final film in this category.
Godzilla -1.
The cheapest movie on this list until we start getting into the live-action short films.
I also think it is the number 2 most snubbed film of the year.
Yeah.
I think
Yank was astounding. The performances were all amazing. The cinematography,
I think you yank Maestro right out of that Best Picture list. Unfortunately, again, like I said, while I loved it, I think you yank Barbie right out of that Best Picture list. It's what a achievement.
Yeah, it sucks that Godzilla is not going up against Oppenheimer in the Best Picture.
That would be...
That's the real snub.
That would, no pun intended, blow Barbenheimer right out of the water. That would be hilarious.
Because it is in very many ways. These are two different perspectives of how people responded to the atomic bomb.
It's so interesting visually what the director's able to pull off with that amount of money.
Yeah.
It's a very, very, in terms of today's big budget action spectacle films, an incredibly small budget. The way he's almost able to pull off a puppet-like, in a positive way, almost a puppet-like real version of Godzilla with digital effects is incredible. You know, you felt like you were watching those Toho films back in the day. Yeah. It was incredible. I don't want to talk too much about Godzilla -1 right now, just because I have a lot to say about it in the snubs list. But I guess my personal pick, Godzilla -1, or the creator would take it. I think it's going to be Guardians.
It's probably going to be Guardians. But Godzilla, I think, really deserves it for just how much they accomplished with so little.
Yeah.
I have personal beef with this category specifically. Actually, I think it's about 10-year-old beef now. But I remember this was the only category that Pacific Rim made it into.
Yes.
And was beaten out by The Lone Ranger from Disney.
We could do a whole podcast on the snubbing and the burying of Pacific Rim as a film.
Yeah. I will gladly.
Yeah.
Oh.
Best visual effects.
Absolutely disappointing. The one sequel we got was.
We don't talk about that.
That film doesn't exist.
It doesn't.
I really wish it didn't. I'll give you.
Both of Charlie Day's best and worst performances.
Yeah.
Actually, I liked him.
I didn't like him in the second one. I liked him in the first one.
He was phenomenal in the first.
To be fair, there wasn't. I mean, I love John Boyega, but there wasn't much else going on in that movie.
No. Best film editing. I think Thelma Schoonmaker is going to take it for Killers of the Flower Moon. She repeatedly has won awards for Scorsese films. In films that Scorsese himself has not won awards for. She has cut almost all his films very masterfully. You don't notice how she kind of weaves these 3-hour epic sagas to be something that is digestible and kind of understandable. Oppenheimer, I thought, was interesting in the way it kind of, again, like I said earlier, it moves like a bullet train for a 3-hour film. You're not getting classic cuts. You're not getting classic structure for scenes or for acts. You're moving through it, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Anatomy of a Fall was very good in the way editing kind of plays into what you know about the mystery and as the story progresses. Holdovers, I don't know if there's a lot of... I guess if you're talking from a cinematography standpoint, and it's not even in that category, sadly, I think it has more of a chance. Poor Things, again, I haven't seen, looks visually wonderful. I think Thelma Schoonmaker takes it for Killers of the Flower Moon.
I feel like it's got to be either that or Oppenheimer.
Best Original Score is our next one. I think that's Oppenheimer, hands down.
Yeah.
I would like to see Killers of the Flower Moon just because of the more traditional Osage music and instrumentation it uses. I think that could be the one to upset it, but Oppenheimer's score, the way it kind of lives in your chest, is really hard to deny. And I think American Fiction, sneakily, like you said earlier, films where you're not realizing that the score is so good or how it's moving you through the story. I think American Fiction has this kind of jazz, almost kind of blues score that is almost used as scene transitions, but in such a way that you're not noticing.
Yeah, you don't think about the music until after the fact. And that's the best kind of... And I mean, don't get me wrong, Indiana Jones is obviously here. The Indiana Jones theme is iconic.
I was going to say, I don't know if he did it, but if John Williams...
It is.
Oh. John Williams.
How many times can we give John Williams the award, though, for...
Yeah, he's getting old.
While it's hard work, essentially the same score.
And, like, John Williams' scores are... They work for the films they're in, obviously. Like, Indiana Jones is a bunch of interesting set pieces with these big, sweeping scores, and that's really cool, and I do like that, but I find the more subtle scores to be more interesting.
And I mean, it's almost undeniable. How many times are you doing something or imagining something and you're not singing that Indiana Jones adventure music in your head? That
Indiana
main theme
Jones
is...
Or E.T. or Star Wars.
Well, it had to be good enough that it beat out whatever... I mean, Barbie's not even on the list, even though it has several Best Original Song nominees, which we'll get to in a minute. There's got to be something there, because I've heard the rest of the movie's nothing.
It's not nothing. It's good. I don't know if it's Indiana Jones.
Neither was Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
I'll defend that movie. We'll have another podcast about that. I'll defend Crystal Skull in a way I won't defend Dial of Destiny.
Now that's interesting.
Best Original Song, snub of the year, Super Mario Brothers, Peaches. What are we doing? What are we doing?
Get this out of here.
Jack Black put on the performance of a lifetime, and we have shunned him, and it's so heartbreaking.
True, although I will say that movie did have a little bit of a sin with their original score.
Yes.
They did not credit the Donkey Kong rap to Grant Kirkhope, the original composer. He was never mentioned anywhere in the film.
0 out of 10.
0 out of 10. If any reason that Peaches is not on here, it's because of that.
They were worried they might have to pay Grant Kirkhope something.
I think it'd be nice to see the Killers of the Flower Moon song win. It is a very good song. And again, something we as a mass society are maybe not used to hearing is often kind of that classic and Osage music and the way their instruments and the way that they structure musical arrangements, things like that. It's a really good song. I think What Was I Made For takes it. I think Billie Eilish always does a great job.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic song. It kind of encapsulates all of the kind of biting satire and none of the comedic satire, but that's kind of what you need in a film that is mostly comedy.
Yeah.
It kind of grounds the film.
To let you know.
In the same way, I'm infuriated that Peaches is not on this list. Man, am I glad I'm Just Ken is on this list.
Yeah.
I think that song is wonderful. Again, kind of like What Was I Made For? It encapsulates that whole character's journey within the film. And I think where they place it in the film is kind of genius. And Greta Gerwig, amazing director. Sad she's not on this list, but I think out of all of them, that is Barbie's award to win.
I will say, I don't know if this one's a snub. I do just find it interesting that we had a major Disney release with a whole new soundtrack that did not manage to make it to Best Original Song.
Didn't have Lin-Manuel Miranda.
It's true. that certainly did not help issues. But yeah, it is one of those things that I kind of always think of, oh, there was a new Disney movie this year. Spoiler, also didn't make it Best Animated Feature. So maybe that might have something to do with it also not making Best Original Song.
Well, let's get on to the next one. Best Cinematography.
I think it's going to be, I think we're looking at Oppenheimer.
Yeah, I don't think this is in fairness, I haven't seen El Conde.
That's a film that I think, interestingly, I've not seen it. It's a Spanish language film. It's on Netflix if anybody's interested. If I can remember correctly, it's looking at a Spanish dictator through the lens of him possibly being a vampire. It looks incredible. I just have not had a chance to sit down and watch it. It's shot in a different type. I forget the aspect ratio it's shot in. It's black and white. It looks visually arresting in a good way, almost kind of like Nosferatu was, the way it uses black and white, but I can't really speak to that. Killers of the Flower Moon, beautiful. Obviously, Scorsese, he's working magic. Maestro, I think, could be a dark horse. I think, while I did not love that film, I think the shot composition and the way that Bradley Cooper uses the camera is kind of what makes that movie get on any of these other awards. I think the cinematography in that film is fantastic. And the way it uses aspect ratio to denote time and period is very interesting. Poor Things, again, I can't speak to because I haven't seen it. I think it's Oppenheimer's to win, but maybe Maestro's to kind of steal.
Well, Nolan kind of owns that category, I feel.
Yeah.
So,
best costume design. I kind of feel like it's got to be Barbie because,
I think Poor Things might be making. I think it might be putting its vines into everybody's hopes and dreams there, because Yorgos, I think, from what I've seen, has made such a lush and colorful and beautiful world. I think favorite is Barbie in the zeitgeist, but I think Poor Things could come up from behind and really steal that.
I have to give Barbie a lot of credit, though, because they literally were just like, we are just going to actually make all of these ridiculous outfits from the entire history of our weird toy line.
And while we're talking about John Williams maybe making the same score for Indiana Jones, how much credit are we giving to the costume? Again, I'm not besmirching anyone's name. It's very hard work. But if we're choosing costumes from a history of a line that's already been designed, what are we looking at?
Because you then still have to get that to work.
That's true. It is, again, I'm not trying to put them down. It is a very hard medium.
Starting point.
Yes.
What I mean by that same standard, how much work do you have to put into making Napoleon's suit?
No, I don't know why that's on here.
Well, in that vein, you look at Oppenheimer. How much is Nolan just kept in from Dunkirk that they just said, you know what, close enough, put it on.
Put Killian in that suit, in Mark Rylance's suit now.
That guy drowned, put a suit on this guy, because he's the same time period. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I hear you.
I think that argument can actually be made for a company.
Basically, yeah.
I think
costume's a weird one, I suppose, in that way.
I think costume design is a two-horse race between Barbie and Poor Things.
Yeah. Makeup and hairstyle, which somehow Barbie didn't get on.
I don't know why Golda is on here. I think it's on here because they made Helen Mirren look even older than she already looks. That's the only kind of context I can really put that in. It's the only category it's in on this list.
And for Society of Snow.
That, I believe, is in Best International, no?
Is it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Again, haven't seen it. I have people close to us, people that work at the library, that can speak more to that film in particular. I can't really speak to a lot on this list. I think Maestro, it's going to be very hard to win, considering the controversy around Bradley Cooper and the facial features that he decided to emulate, particularly on Leonard Bernstein. I think, again, like Costume, I think that's a two-horse race for Poor Things and Oppenheimer with what's on the list.
Best original screenplay.
Best original screenplay. I'd love to see, again, anything the holdovers can take.
Yeah.
That's good, but it's actually in my second position. If it's going to win anything, I think Past Lives absolutely should take this. With it is so... And again, I know I've said it, I could have a whole podcast about Past Lives as a film, but it starts with the writing, and it is one of the best written scripts that I've ever experienced in film in general. And I know that seems like hyperbole. Just watch the film and you'll know what I'm talking about. It is so rich and emotionally mature and kind of unforgiving in all the best ways. And it uses language and words not sparingly, but so efficiently to get across these giant themes and ideas and cultural kind of touchstones. And Not Even a Fall, I think was interesting if you've read the script, the way it uses pictures and almost kind of like the ideas of evidence being presented to kind of show to the reader or show to the actors kind of what they're looking at or how they're structuring it. I think it's a very interestingly structured screenplay. I would really like to see Past Lives take this, though.
Okay, so best adapted screenplay.
I think it's going to be Oppenheimer.
This is interesting because a lot of people are like, well, why is Barbie here? It's like, well, she sort of exists.
It's adapted is a very loose term.
Loose terminology.
I think American Fiction it's a fantastic script, especially the way it uses satire and script writing as a almost plot device is very interesting. I think that could be a kind of underrated one that may take the award, but I think it's going to be Oppenheimer for the just dense amount of information that he gets across in that film. I mean, if anybody's read American Prometheus or seen that book, it's a brick. It's amazing. He made only a 3-hour film about it. Best documentary feature, I am unfortunately... Yeah, I have not seen any of them, and it seems to unfortunately be a trend. I've seen documentaries this year, just none on this list.
A lot of these tend to be like... I find a lot of the best documentary features tend to have very low releases.
Very low releases.
Yeah, very few of them
are
picked up on.
A lot of them are foreign, I believe. Foreign documentaries, which, again, fantastic. Last year we saw Navalny win that one very deservingly. It's an important category. I need to watch more documentaries is really what it's apparent to me here.
That's how I always feel about the short films as well, because a lot of them just don't get releases outside of film festivals, and occasionally you'll find a theater like when they're after the nominations have been made, they'll have like screenings of all of them.
I will say, if anybody wants to watch the best documentary shorts this year, they are all findable and free on either YouTube or Disney+. I've seen 90% of Island in Between. That's fantastic. Very emotional. And a lot of these best documentary shorts are very important in the subject categories they're covering, and unfortunately are kind of looked over by the film community as a whole. Nai Nai and Wai Po is the only one I've seen in its entirety. It's delightful. It's so good. It's very interesting in the way it looks at. It's kind of like a 15-minute glimpse into the idea of friendship and companionship and things like that. Very kind of lighthearted, feel-good documentary short. I would like to see that win. I've only seen 2 on this list, so I can't really make a definitive say or a guess. We can move on to production design. I think Barbie takes that.
Yeah, I mean, they literally built the dream houses. Like, the sets on that film are astounding.
I think Poor Things is its only real competition there. But yeah, I think that's Barbie's to win for the night. Sound, I think the creator is going to lose. I thought that one, as visually rich as it was also very audibly rich. And it was, again, Gareth Edwards, he's using every piece of the film to enhance another. And I think the sound in that film is incredible. That's going to go to Oppenheimer, I think.
Yeah.
In the same way Gareth Edwards does it with his films, Christopher Nolan is just a titan in being able to use every single iota of his film to spotlight what's going on. It is something to be experienced, especially, again, I saw it in IMAX. It is something else. Live action short film, I unfortunately I've seen 1 out of the 4 shorts for The Wonderful Life of Henry Sugar. It's Wes Anderson. It's very hard to see him not taking this.
Yeah.
I've heard polarizing things about that collection of short films in general, but again, I can't really make a determination as I've not seen many of these. Will hopefully in the near future, but I don't know if it will be before the awards show. International feature, Again, I unfortunately have not seen any of these. I think there are some snubs on this list. Most notably, even though it's in Best Picture, Anatomy of a Fall. I know there's a little bit of beef with Justine Triet and Her Country and it not being nominated for that film, for that country's official film for Best International.
Yeah, the way that works is such an oddity because each country can only submit one film. So they have to decide what they're sending to the Academy.
And while I've heard great things about every single one of these films, Society of the Snow, if anybody wants to catch it on Netflix, Zone of Interest, you can rent. Io Capitano, I don't even think comes out till this week. So that's a very hard, at least in the US, so that's a very hard one. I will be seeing Perfect Days on Sunday. That's Wim Wenders. If you don't know anything about him, he's a fantastic German director. He made Wings of Desire with Bruno Ganz back in the day. It's one of my favorite international movies of all time. I have it on Criterion. It's very hard to see Wim Wenders not doing fantastic work. So those are definitely, if post-award season, if you can find them on streaming or rent them, this appears to be a very strong pool of films for international feature.
All right.
Hey, finally, the category where I've seen all but one of the films. I
haven't
seen Robot Dreams. I've heard it's really cute.
If anybody's interested in Philly, in the area, March 6th, I believe the Ritz 5 is doing a screening of it. I plan on being there. It's based on a French graphic novel, if I'm not mistaken. We also do have it here if you want to check it out at Lansdowne Library. I've heard it's a really good film.
I'm going to cut to the chase here because nobody beats Miyazaki.
I've not seen it. It's so sad I've not seen it.
Spider-Man was gorgeous and a lot of fun. Elemental is sweet and...
I really liked Elemental.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it was vastly underrated, and I feel bad that its trailers were so bad.
That movie will be studied for how bad it was marketed.
Yeah, because it's a fantastic film. Nimona, both a really fun watch and just a fascinating story on how it actually got made.
I think that's another one, advertising-wise. Netflix kind of really dropped the ball on that.
Well, I mean, they recently just dropped it on YouTube for free for everyone to watch, and it did numbers.
Okay, so at least it's getting seen, because I think that is a deserving film.
Yeah. Again, I have not seen Robot Dreams, but these are all phenomenal, but... Miyazaki released a feature film this year.
And I'm
so sorry.
And while it happens sometimes, not very often. First, obviously, we saw it with Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
I think, at least from what I'm hearing, Boy and the Heron, but I think also with Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, you're looking at two films that also could have made it onto the Best Picture list.
Yeah.
This is like the niche category. Yeah, we got it. You get it, listeners. This is like our stuff.
This is our jam.
This is where we live.
This is also... I have beef with this category because my feeling is Boy and the Heron should probably win it.
It's probably going to.
We can hope, but I've seen things win this category that should not.
Yeah.
So my fear is...
The Academy kind of notoriously does not care about this section.
Do we see an Elemental upset?
Yes.
You think?
It's got the stamp of Disney on it. So they say,
you think?
Movie Disney, it wins. Whatever. What's next?
Now, while I loved the film, I don't think it deserves the award. I wouldn't be mad if it won, but I'd be very surprised.
I think the year Miyazaki did The Wind Rises.
Yeah, I've not seen that one yet.
That's fantastic.
It's on my list. It's on my list.
But I think that one might have lost to, I want to say, like Toy Story 3.
Yep.
Wait.
No.
Wait. Toy Story 3 was...
It was 4.
Oh.
It was 4. That's what it was.
No, Wind Rises was 2012. That had to be 3. This is my weird movie knowledge. You're all getting a look at the sickness.
Then maybe it was something else.
There have been a lot of films where it's a very poor Disney film beat what was universally agreed to be the better film because numerous members of the Academy are just like, I didn't watch any of these. I just picked the Disney one. And they went on record saying that.
Yeah, hopefully we're looking at a better voting pool this year, and as they've been making changes to it in the past years.
I'm just saying, if nothing else, if you haven't seen any of the films, abstain.
Yes. And I've not seen...
I have to do in the next section, because I have only seen Letter to a Pig out of all of these.
We will have to, unfortunately, I don't know if, unless you guys want to talk about anything, I've not seen any of these films.
The animated short films, again, some of these are, I think War's Over is on Disney Plus?
Probably, if you're looking at Beatles material. Have you seen any of these, David?
I have not, but I did go back to see what Toy Story 4 beat, and it was Klaus, and I will forever...
I have not seen Klaus. That's another Netflix animated original.
Klaus is pretty neat.
I forget. I'm angry again.
Over Forky, though? Forky?
Very few dumb movies make me cry. And by that I mean movies that shouldn't make me cry made me cry. I cry every time at Klaus.
Oh, see, I
I'm
cry.
stone-faced during
I cry every Toy Story movie I watch every time. But I think that...
Certainly 2 and 3.
I think nostalgia really played a hand there in Toy Story 4.
Got only a little bit of time, so why don't we go over some snubs real quick?
I've got major beef this year with the snubs we're looking at. First, I don't know if you guys have seen it. I don't know who out there in the world has seen it. But if you have, it was, again, a film that we're seeing recently, not memeified, but became very big in the late teen, early 20s TikTok culture. The Iron Claw, if you have not seen this film,
keep seeing memes and such about it, but I haven't
It
yet.
is snubbed in almost every category on this list, and it is a crime that somebody has to answer for. I think it is snubbed in actor for Zac Efron. Watch the movie before you either slander my statement or vilify me.
I'm very impressed to hear that there is a Zac Efron performance that is that high quality.
Watch the film. Zac Efron, he's surrounded by an incredible cast, but the performance he gives, especially in the closing minutes of this film, will leave you uncontrollably sobbing. Wow. It is fantastic. I'm almost welling up here thinking about it. The Iron Claw for actor, I think picture, I think production design, the way it brings to life kind of the 70s and 80s sportatorium and that like, WWE wrestling.
Yeah, that's the thing, it was basically a wrestling film from what I understood.
Yes. Original screenplay, I think it's a fantastically written film. It is a very depressing film. I will let you know that going into it. It's not an easy watch, but man, does it deserve to be in almost every category on this list. May, December, if you are awards-centric, you are looking at Charles Melton. He is criminally left off the Best Supporting Actor list. I think if we're looking at it, you take Ryan Gosling right out of there, you put Charles Melton in. He gives... And this is someone that, if you know him, it's from Riverdale or CW shows. And he gives such a layered and mature performance as this character. It's something to see. Saltburn, I think, while one of the funnest and oddest movies of the year, while I don't think it was up there with like Best Picture or Best Actor or Actress or anything like that, I think the cinematography and the score for that film are a little looked over. The cinematography is fantastic. It's shot in such an interesting way, and the way the cinematographer speaks about the way he used the aspect ratio to kind of contextualize and to kind of give you almost I'm peeking through a keyhole to see this story type of aspect that kind of makes that film as good as it is. I don't like saying this about films in general because it seems a little to kind of degrade the film a little bit. I think that script is a little smarter. It's a little less smart than it thinks it is. Yeah. But I think definitely for cinematography and score, it's a little snubbed. The Killer for sound and cinematography. If you've seen that movie, David Fincher, what are we doing? What are we doing if we're leaving that film? The way it uses music and sound as almost a character in the film is fantastic and innovative. David Fincher always does great work. If I'm going down the list really quick, When Evil Lurks, very disturbing Spanish horror film. Not an easy watch. I think should have been on Best International. It's fantastic. It's definitely a warning, recommend. Please research it before you watch it because it is not an easy watch. It is not a pleasant watch, but it is a fantastic story.
General fan of doesthedogdie.com for that sort of thing?
We're looking at
it's a good
do the children die sort of thing.
That's the thing is they list like, here are the triggers that this film has.
Yeah, it is a very triggering film.
It's a good place to check for that sort of film.
They cloned Tyrone. Very interesting, funny satire on Netflix. They kind of dumped it. It's unfortunate. I thought it was a really good kind of... It's going to be a cult classic, I think. Very interesting kind of 80s sci-fi feel. I think cinematography-wise that... Well, I don't think it deserved to be in the Oscars. I think it definitely deserves to be recognized in some way.
I feel like we need some sort of award just for best title because they cloned Tyrone. Literally, I was scrolling through Netflix and I saw that and I'm like, I'm watching this. I don't know what this is, but this is the best title for a film I've seen in years.
Quickly again, John Wick 4 cinematography. I think the top-down sequence alone should have earned it an Oscar nomination. That was incredible. Super Mario movie song, we talked about that earlier. Crazy good. Honestly, with Peaches.
It didn't make it to Best Animated Feature, although it is a surprisingly stacked year. But I kind of liked it better than Elemental.
I feel like that film coasts on nostalgia a lot. I don't know how well put together that story really is.
It has one of the, and I still just cannot stand Chris Pratt Mario, but, I look forward to also hating him as Garfield soon.
Well, I look forward to seeing Willem Dafoe and Danny DeVito as Mario and Waluigi.
See
now that
elimination.
That would save the films.
Also, Shigeru Miyamoto, if you have any input, just
I
saying.
assume he does. He's not actually head of Nintendo anymore, but he's still a big deal.
If you haven't seen it, very interesting film. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. Just go watch it. Return to Seoul, I think, should have been on the best international feature film list. It's very hard to explain without giving you the full plot. Not a lot of trigger warnings in this one. It's kind of it's a drama that kind of takes place in 3 different time periods. Very interesting film. Very emotional watch. Definitely give it a look. Return to Seoul. And my number 2 most snubbed of this year on the list after Iron Claw, Asteroid City.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah, like nothing. Nothing.
I think picture, production design, and song in particular. I know not everybody loved Asteroid City. I know it was not everyone's cup of tea. I thought it was wonderful and layered and beautiful. Production design, we're talking about Wes Anderson here.
Yeah.
What are we doing? The way he builds his films is just astounding. It's unique. It's in film. You can hardly say this. It is singular.
Yeah.
You know you're watching a Wes Anderson film.
Nothing looks like him but him. And, I remember a bunch of people doing we made an AI try and make Wes Anderson Star Wars.
No, wasn't good.
None of this looks like Wes Anderson. What's wrong with you? Yeah. The whole AI thing is probably a topic best not broached when we're already this low on time.
Last note on Asteroid City, if you want to hear a delightful, funny, kind of throwaway song that I wish had been Dear Alien, performed by one of the children actors in the film, it's delightful. It kind of encapsulates the nuance of the film in a very sneaky way that you're not really going to notice unless you're really thinking about it. It's fantastic. Godzilla -1, picture and score.
Yeah.
Shoot right past international feature film. I think that should be in the best picture. It's a Godzilla film. It's a meditation on Japanese culture post-World War II. It is a drama. It is an epic. It is fantastic. And that score, when it kicks in with the classic Godzilla score, I nearly jumped out of my seat. I was so excited.
Shout out to the goat Akira Ifukube. Well, there you have it. That's the skinny on the Academy Awards 2024. You have the lowdown. If anyone's making a pool or something, you have some in-depth knowledge. Any final thoughts?
It's a wonderful year for film. Hopefully we have another. Let's start watching more documentaries, I think.
Yeah, I think that might be the good takeaway. Documentaries and short films.
All right. Well, there's the homework. All right, Matt, once again, thanks for coming back and giving us a really in-depth look at this year's films and yeah.
Of course. Thank you for having me on. It's always fun being on this podcast. I always love the conversations we have and the experience. Small shameless plug. I don't know if this will come out before then, but it will be an ongoing program. Check out the Lansdowne Public Library Film Society. If somehow you hear this before Saturday, March 2nd, I will be screening Singing in the Rain. We will be doing a season of movies on film or film on film, which is essentially movies about movies or about filmmaking. Please come out. It'll be an awesome time. We'll have a lot of conversations similar to this, and we'll be watching an absolute classic.
I can hear the playoff music coming.
Yeah. So, no, we definitely don't have the rights. I can't tell.
Oh, that would be incredible.
But to mitigate that, this has been the Lansdowne Public Library's Geek Out podcast. And one more time, Jeff, if our listeners want to geek out with us, where can they go?
You just head to lansdowne.libraries.org/podcasts. That is with an S. There'll be a green register here button. You click that, fill out a small little questionnaire just telling us what it is you want to talk about and that sort of thing. And we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Thanks for listening.